Tsang and Friends, you're in the right place. My name is Tim Tsang and you're my friends. I hope by the end of the night you guys will be my friends as well, and but we'll see. It's really a comedy show. These are just props and actors, and now the real show will begin. The name of this piece is called For the Sake of Everything, 57-minute dialogue with violist, Patrick Benke, with soprano, Amy Golden, and my friend Ben Finley on bass. And also the dialogue involves peoples with microphones. So whoever you see in this room who has a microphone, I'm going to try to have a dialogue with them. So that's the premise. Did I miss anything? No? That's good. It's my show, so I make up the rules. And yeah, here we go. So this is gonna be exactly 57 minutes, and once I press this start button, then we have begun. So, as you know, I'm in the music school, we're in the music building, and I'm a musician. A lot of us here are musicians, some of us aren't, doesn't matter. What I'm really interested in is three different definitions of music. There's three kinds of music, only three kinds of music in the whole world. First one is defined by the composer Claude Debussy, French composer, who was famously quoted to saying that music is the space between the notes. Right? I think some of us might be familiar with that. If you Google it, Tumblr, or whatever, you'll find that, and it's attributed to him. He was sort of around the impressionistic era, maybe area as well. If we think of geographically speaking, an era is also a geographic location. I don't know, imaginarily speaking, so to speak. There's like that, yeah. So that's the first definition of music that I like to kind of propose as an axiom, of sorts. The space between the notes. The second definition of music I'd like to kind of propose is that that of John Cage. John Cage and Edgar Varese, the composer, and he was known to say that quantify music as organized sound. Actually, the organization of sound, not organized sound. It's organized sound because you're talking about the sound itself, right? But then, so is the music sound then, or the organization of the sound, right? Are we then? Where's the human element in that? Is it the music? Is the material? Are we talking about the sound in one hand, or are we talking about the organization of the sound in the other? And so that's kind of what I'm interested in. I think it makes music exciting in that way. It kind of like brings a different kind of dimension, you may say, the second definition of sound, as I was talking about, is the organization of sound, is the juxtaposition of sound, the placement of sound, the thought behind the placement of the sound, the decision to think about the placement of the sound is perhaps music in that sense. Cage, I won't go into it because I don't know anything about it. The third definition of music is that it comes from Wadada Leo Smith, who was a teacher here for a really long time, I think 20 plus years, and recently retired, but is just a really active performer himself and whatnot. And he's a trumpet player, and he said, we do a lot of this, but it ain't all music. And that got me thinking, because then I started to think about how do we think of the space between the notes, organization of sound, organization of sound, and then the fact that this may not all be music, movement. I don't know what you quantify this as. I don't know what you call this as. I don't know what you. I'm trying to know what you're talking about. You know what I'm talking about? Because, it's not exactly like music in that sense, right? If we talk about this, because Chris Mann taught me to talk like this. It's all your fault, Tom. I've got to say, I can't help myself now. I'm just. Do you want to have anything to say about that? Let's get. I don't see something. I don't want to.
You don't have to.
Hey James, did you turn on the video camera? Sweet, thanks man. So there's also different kinds of time. That's something that I've been studying last semester. I've been just kind of thinking about it. Again, thanks to Tom and some of us kind of thinking about this. There's this, there's kind of like this. There's kind of like three kinds of time that were kind of put forth, so to speak. There is the empirical time, so to speak, EMPIRICALTIME, and that would be the measured time. The time that we look at, the time of the clock, the time of the clock, the time of the clock, so to speak, and the time of the clock. But that's it's the time of the clock. It's the time of the clock. And it's the time of the clock, but it can be the time of the clock if you let it be, See you later. And it can be the time of the clock in that sense because it's the clock. Well, is it the clock or is it the time? Is it organization of sound or is it the sound? Is it the organization of clocks or is it the clock? So that would be the first type of time. And second type of time is the human time. Human time, by the way, all these three comes from this philosopher, French guy named Jacques Rancière. If you guys know, that's like awesome. That guy's like super cool, man. He came over to was he at UCLA or at the Downtown Public Library, I think, and it was like he just gave this awesome talk, and me and my friend Matthew Robertson, he moved out unfortunately to complete his DMA or MFA, I think, and in England. And but anyway, we were late to this talk, and it was the whole library was packed, and we couldn't see anything. And to make it worse, we couldn't get into the actual room where he was speaking. And every time the door would open, the automatic door would kind of open, and then you wouldn't be able to hear him anymore. You know, he just kind of like just faded away. And it's like, and he had an accent too. It was like, and the third time, I can't do a French accent. I'm Chinese Canadian, but you know, he had this just thick accent, and he was just super deep theory and whatnot. And the only thing I caught, even though I took all these notes, the only thing I caught was these 3 notes of time, 3 modes of time, the 3 nodes of time, these 3 modes of time, these 3 nodes of time, these 3 modes of time, these 3 nodes of time, these 3 nodes of time, these 3 modes of time in that sense has to do with, well, as I said, the empirical, the human, but also the narrative. Is the time of the narrative, time of the story, you know, not so much exactly to do with the clock or to do with the human time. Human time has to do with the body, right? The time of the body is not in the sense that, how long does it take you to hear what I'm saying right now to you? The sound is being transmitted into the sound system, I think there, and then there, and there, and there. There's 3 cameras, by the way, that are kind of pointed at you guys. And this is actually being broadcasted in England and Hong Kong and Korea. Isn't that crazy? I'm like, this is like a world premiere. Well, it's just a webcast courtesy of CalArts. But what I was getting at was that there is sort of the second. Okay, we got the first part, empirical time. Empirical time is time of the clock, time of the machine, time of the stock market, time of the machinery, you know, the apparatus, so to speak, that kind of just goes no matter what. You press on, it goes on. It goes off, it goes off. No batteries, it's off. You know, the human time is, well, it's a little flexible, more subjective, you know, I might say. You know, in a certain, it's a little bit flexible in the sense that, you know, you kind of just, depends how you're feeling. You know, this morning I was a little tired, and my human time was a little bit like this, you know? And then I had a cup of coffee, and then I was a little bit more like this, and I was more like Chris Mann. But then, you know, I took class, I was in class with Tom again, and again, Tom, and again, that brightened me up. That gave me lots of energy. I had like so much energy, I'm gonna like blast it open, you know what I mean? So like, that's what I'm doing right now. That's what I feel like doing right now! I love Tom, that's why I keep picking on him, but it just so happens that he sits in the front row, but human time, we got empirical time, we got human time, and the narrative time. Narrative time is talking about like, how long does it take for Little Red Riding Hood to get through the forest, right? Does it take 38 seconds? Is it 13 minutes? 42 seconds? 43? 44? You know, how is she eating too many cookies? You know, is she a little slower? Or is she like kind of like Chris Mann, just going at it, you know what I mean? She's like, bah, 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 bah. And it took like 5 seconds, and that was that, you know. And but narrative time, it doesn't matter, you know. It doesn't matter what the first 2 modes of time, you know, are kind of at, you know, so to speak. Because, but it has a relation to it. You know, it has a relation. It has a relation to it in a certain way where that, you know, we think about running through the forest. We know it's not 2 seconds because most likely, you know, it's a little bit closer. You know, so you don't really think that it's going to be like, you know, right away or whatever. So narrative time is that the time of the story. It's the time of, you know, how. Yeah, you know, how it doesn't really matter. You know, it's almost like time in dreams. You know, maybe some sort of dream logic, so to speak. You know, where the sequence of events is events. That's another thing that Ransom is. The sequence of events has to do with really the story. How is the story being unfolded? You know, how is the story being unfolded? You know, we're not really sure, but we know. We're not really sure, but we know. We're not really sure, but we do know. We do know. Because you know, in a story, we know how the story goes. You know, and so it doesn't matter. It does matter. There's still time being kept because the sequences of events are you know, kind of happening and so forth and whatnot. And so in that sense, it's kind of helpful in that way. So if I want to get the energy saver, well, that's the energy saver. Display, but it's. So I was, I think amongst different types of time then I was, I was born in Hong Kong and, big city boy and whatnot. And one thing I really remember very clearly was coming to Canada when I was 7. And we lived in a high-rise. By the way, my brother's here from Hong Kong visiting. I remember I used to really enjoy hanging out on the balcony and whatnot and watch the cars pass by. And I did this experiment. I remember this really clearly, where I would kind of watch the I would watch the cars pass by, and then look at my watch because I had a digital watch that I kind of had, with me and whatnot. And I think it might have been a birthday present or something, and and then I would watch the cars pass by. I was really into cars. Okay, that's a Chevy Cavalier, that's a BMW, and that's a that's a whatever. And so I would look at my watch and be like, how long does it take for a nice car to pass by? And I would look at my watch and literally time, and then a BMW would pass by and be like, whoa. Another, what do you call it, a Lincoln would pass by and it would be like, and then, I don't know, and then I would wait for 2.5 minutes, and then nothing would come, and then, but I felt, in my mind though, I was 8 years old or something, I felt like I had it down. This was the system of everything. This was the way to do it, man. And I came back inside the house and I told my dad, I figured out this new formula. I know exactly how long it takes for a nice car to pass by. How did that feel? Better back here? Yeah. How come?
Harmonica needs its own little place. It's not good as...
Oh, the harmonica.
Yeah, the harmonica.
How does that relate with your voice?
Out of 10, word for word.
Yeah.
Any wind experience kind of a trip from me.
What do you
Because
mean?
it's not me going,
So it's almost like a filter of some sort for your voice?
It's mono. Well, it could...
That's pretty sick. Cool. Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
Afraid, afraid, afraid,
James, the camera's on, right? So, I don't know, how many of you guys heard of Marshall McLuhan? Sort of, roughly. He said, the medium is the message. I don't know what year he said that, but it was a while ago, but not too while ago. It's still in very recent memory. And if the medium equals the message, then if we were to take, it in like a mathematical kind of like equation or something. Oh, by the way, like setup team is sick. These guys, let me just show you what these guys did. Like, they went from this, okay, to that, to this. What was I saying? If the medium indeed is the message, in that way, I don't know, does that make sense? I mean, if that was the case, then, like, would that be like the case? I mean, because then would that mean, like, it goes the other way as well, like, you have, the message is the medium then. If we have all these messages, then that becomes the means by which we live, so to speak. We're just, messages. We have the iMessages, we have like advertisement messages, or we have like school messages, or we have email messages, we have text messages, and we have messages, and, but what kind of messages? Are we talking about meaning? Are we talking about meaning? Are we talking about meaning, or are we talking about messages? And is it about the messages in that sense equal to the medium? Can they in such a way can they like kind of can they be like part of the message, or the medium, or I think that was you, Ben. But so I wonder about that, and What is a thing? We were reading an article yesterday about written by Bruno Latour. He was talking about Martin Heidegger, philosopher, and he was like, "Oh well, he treats like this thing. There's the concept of the thing. There's like the concept of the thing as supreme. You know, almost like it's sort of like lifted up or something. And then there's sort of like this object, and it's a jug." And I don't know what it does, but it doesn't do much. But this thing is a thing. And we attribute things to this thing. And it just... But Badiou says a thing is a thing. A thing is a part of the thing. A thing is a thing. A thing is a part of the thing. You know, a thing is a part of the thing. According to Deleuze, there are no easy concepts. What does it mean to tell a truth in that sense? The truth is a representation of the real reality as lively as life itself. Every word is proper place or a certain radius of sorts. You know, a teacher asks a school child, if the father comes home drunk, a violation of truth circles. Child says, no, it's a lie. Carries out the same truth and saying yes, well, which would mean that violate the circles at home. That's no good. The earth is a spaceship in that way. It's either utopia or oblivion. You know, you're talking about this, Buckminster Fuller wrote a book called Utopia or Oblivion. And I don't know what that means, but that title struck me. And it was like either this or that. Either this or that. Either you play or you don't. Either you play or you don't. Either you do whatever you want or you don't. I mean, you can do anything you want, but you don't have to. I mean, you can do anything you want, but you don't have to. I mean, you can do anything you want, but you don't have to. I mean, you can do anything you want, but you don't have to. You can do anything you want, but you don't have to. You can do everything you want, but you don't have to. You can do anything you want, but you don't have to. You can do anything you want, but you don't have to. You know what I mean? So, like, you can't literally just do anything you want, but you don't have to. You know, you can literally do anything you want, but you don't have to.
Scientifically, materialistically, seeking out a new temporary space, form, dimension, One, rational mind. Two, emotive mind. Three, imaginative mind.
Device this on one wheel, never support
support this device on one wheel. Never support this device on one wheel. Never support, keep level, never support this device on one wheel. This device should move more easily. Never force. It requires a minimum of 2 people to safely move this, This is a warning to you all. Read directions before moving. Failure to follow instructions can it can damage or destroy the unit and may cause serious injury. We don't want that. We don't want that at all. In fact, we don't want that at all. It requires a minimum of 2 people to safely move slowly. We have to use caution. Of course 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 we have to use caution. This device should move easily. Of course, check clearance. Front, side, and top. Keep level. Never support this device on one wheel. Unlock rear wheels before moving. Lock rear wheels at all other times. To move through doorways, the last, at last. Concrete weights must be removed and this unit placed on its side. Directions to remove ballast. Danger. This device can fall over if not properly supported. Do not attempt to remove ballast before supporting this device. Do not roll this device without ballast. To remove ballast, remove screws that attach metal strap to 4x4. Remove lag screws that attach 4x4 to trolley at sides. Ballast can now be removed. To place this unit on its side, close side panels and secure for the sake of everything. Protect bottom corner with pad. Tip on the side only. Do not tip on face or back. This unit is heavy. Use common sense. Requires a minimum of 3 strong men. Requires a minimum of 3 strong men. Requires a minimum of 3 strong men. play?
You start.
Me?
Yeah, like a groove, like a really
Like a groove?
like a funky.
Like a crazy. I got you. I got you.
Okay, quick step.
E flat. No, E flat. E flat? E flat. Oh, okay. No, G. G's better as you got those.
He's not gonna let you go before he's trying to talk until the end. Right.
Right. So we don't have much time. A sharp's the same thing as B flat. No, it's okay. No. Okay. No. Group. Okay. Group. Where's the time? Okay, cool, got it. Ready? Yeah. Patrick, thank you. So as promised, I don't know if you want to go, please feel free to go. But that was a piece. I promised to kind of have like a little Q&A just to kind of chat it up or whatnot, or if anybody has any questions or suggestions or answers or whatever, you know, we'd really welcome that. It's also, I mean, if you guys wanted to go anywhere, you need to be anywhere, you know, feel free to go as well. It's a good time. But if not, you know, this is sort of like the, you know, like after like a Shakespeare play or something, like these guys have all these like smart questions to ask the actors, and the actors don't really know what to say. this is sort of that time. Is that fair? Yeah. So, I mean, does anybody have any comments or questions? Or got a mic here.
How are you feeling?
Feeling pretty good. Yeah. I mean, it's a joy to perform, and it's a joy to make music, but it's more of a joy to do it with other people, you know. And not everybody has that privilege, I think, and I just feel very privileged, yeah, to be able to do that. And, you know, these guys are just so good. You know, you can tell by the way they play and handle themselves. And my, I just really wanted to make them uncomfortable because these are really, you know, like top of the line improvisers, you know, and this is a top of the line school, you know, institution where we have just large number of masters at their craft, you know, and then, you know, these young bucks and are you know, kind of just super good at what they do. And so I was like, well, I want to do a recital, I want to perform, I want to do this and that. And part of it is, yes, is to complete the requirements of the degree and whatnot, but at the same time I want it to mean something. I want it to kind of be special as well. And so it just, these guys are just the people that I just happened to be hanging out with, and I really like what they were doing, you know, the little that I got to see, or the much, and then we just sort of, think, struck up sort of a friendship, or kind of a, we just like hanging out. So I thought that's kind of really cool, and so that's in a long, long answer to that. Yeah, just very thankful, yeah, to be like treated so well here. Like the sound team, just like, do you need anything? Do you need anything? You're like, this is like so cool. Like, I've been out of school for 5 years, so like been having to like book the gigs and having to do all these things, everything on my own. And so it's kind of like a luxury to be like sitting here and like playing whatever I want, literally, and with whoever I kind of want to. And so that's like I'm super thankful for that. Yeah. Anyone else?
What is the drawings?
The drawing.
Yeah.
Like this stuff right here? Yeah, so this is a sort of I call it a mind map. It's fancier than it sounds, but it's mind of my map, or map of my mind in that way. And as I mentioned earlier, I was out of school for 5 years, and so I had nobody to talk to. So I was taking a lot of notes and kind of sort of just create an inner dialogue with myself. And I got in the habit of, it's kind of like journaling, you kind of vocalize your thoughts or whatever, but it's kind of like, I guess, maybe some of them are based on theory, some of them are based on like subjective experiences or thoughts, or I don't actually agree with everything I wrote here, but that's what came through my mind. So it's kind of like it's actually a 4-month record of CalArts information in a way, and here on a given day, any given day, for those that don't come to the school here, or visiting, there's tons of people who've got loads of ideas and just wealth of experience, and references and whatnot. I'm always on my phone like, okay, I've never heard of that person, I've never heard of that person. And so this was sort of like a way to kind of spatially map out, like what does DJ Shadow have to do with Bruce Lee? What does he have to do with Eric Satie, or John Coltrane or Mondrian, or so forth and so forth. Yeah. So it's not like it just kind of came out of necessity. Yeah. But then it was cool that I studied with another teacher here, Sean Griffin, and he was like, "Dude, you need to get out more." It's like I was just in my shell and like whatever, and he was like, "Oh man, you gotta make some friends." And put all this, because I had all these notebooks that were like this big, and then he's like, "Yeah, why don't you put it on a score or put it up on a big thing?" And so, I did, and I put it in a nice frame, and it's hanging up at home right now, and it looks good. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it musically? Do you want to talk about how it relates to what we did?
No. Yeah, that was also one of the things I was kind of trying to get the advice of Michael Pissarro, one of my teachers, composition teacher, and he was challenging me as to like, well, what is this really a score? Because what is a score in experimental music? It has to do with, well, are there rules? Are there regulations? Are there instructions? Are there axioms even, to kind of point you to do something? And I wasn't really sure. I don't know if I totally made up my mind, in that way. And so I was careful to not introduce it as a score, in maybe a traditional sense. But I think in the music department we have such a wide range of composers and performers that like the word score could be really held quite loosely and whatnot. One definition of a score that I was drawn to was it's probably just Wikipedia, but one of the things is that it's a visual aid of some sort, or visual object of some sort that would enhance the musical experience on an auditory, which you wouldn't necessarily get if you didn't have it, right? So in that way, I was hoping to kind of, you could think of it as a metaphor or a symbol or whatnot on like a big picture, no pun intended, scale, but then you have a bigger picture there, kind of ruled by the digital or whatever, and then, so how do these interact, in that way, where, I mean, like time is digitally kept, but how abstract is that, how real is that, how materialistic is that, and then this is sort of like the material that we can touch, so it's sort of like a juxtaposition of that, and then also like, in terms of dialogue, what happens when we talk to each other? I think that's another thing that really fascinates me, is that like, well, do we hear the sounds, and at what point do the sounds carry the meaning, or indicators of where to go, and how to look at JKD and be like, oh, like right there, and at what point, and I think Michael also, I don't want to take credit for this, but like he was saying, I think last week, about in experimental music, one of the main traits or characters of that is the kind of reevaluation, not so much the demeaning or the abolishment of the audience performer or composer relationship, but it's sort of a re-examining of the relationships in that way, and it's the musical spectrum or the musical platform, or I guess the musical acts as a platform for which those kind of parties, I guess, could be re-examined and re-engaged in a way that may or may not have happened before, previously. Is that fair to say? Anyone else? Yes.
Can you explain what you played on the piano? Like how much did you compose what you played? Or
Can you guys hear her?
yeah.
Trying to be official here. So just can I explain?
Yes, I could tell sometimes obviously like you play folk or you play jazz, but or you play contemporary stuff. But was it any of it written by you, or was it all like pieces of other pieces that are written by someone else, or what? And where did the inspiration come from?
Yeah, I guess the stuff that wasn't written by other people, you could say, was written by me. But I guess I'm interested in seeing the play between the line between like improvisation and composition, like many of us here. But just I wonder if going back to like what I said at the beginning, I don't know if you remember, but like Debussy's definition of music being like the space between notes. That's within a given composition, where the scripted text, there's like words or like the melody is going da da da, and you can go like da 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 or da 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 or da da da, and there's just infinite kind of, and so for me, I think that's where the composition lies in this instance. I didn't physically write the notes down that I was sort of playing, and that was sort of maybe like a hybrid, between like improvised play and maybe pre-existing compositions of the sort. But because I'm not playing the compositions in their usual context, right? So this isn't a concert about Bach, but I played Bach, and these guys played along beautifully, and so that was kind of like a way of playing, not just playing music, but playing with music, not for the sake of playing with music, but playing music to see how like the music can be used. So the second definition of music was like organization of sound. Well, sound includes, for me, music is a type of sound, right? Like if indeed we go with the organization of sound, if we were to say like sound was bigger than music in this context, then the organization of music is also music then. So I guess I'm trying to play around with that a little bit and see like what works and what doesn't, and you guys could tell me if it worked or didn't, but that's kind of how I've been approaching, I think, like composition, per se. Because one of the really frustrating things for me, like just growing up playing piano and like just starting to improvise and whatnot, like my mom would tell me, "Oh, you should write this stuff down, like it's so cool," and I couldn't do it, and then from just very young until now, like I just either don't have the patience or just there's like an inability to grab what's in here and put it onto here, onto the paper. And I think the picture, in a large way, kind of satisfies that, if you may, I guess. Like, so maybe because it's so literal, because it's using a language that maybe is more confined. I don't know. I'm making that up. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. Yeah. You guys have anything to say?
I've just been writing for a bit. Seems that
Yeah, I guess so.
Could you talk about how that contributes to this?
Hmm. Well, I guess it's also in a effort in the same vein of wanting to compose music, like wanting to make music, but I can't. You know, like that stuff behind you, like I can't do that. Like that, and then like counting that out. Like somehow something just gets lost in translation. And so the second definition of music was very useful for me in that organization of sound. I started to think of it instead of having 8 notes or 12 notes in an octave, you know, C, whatever, C sharp. And I thought about it in terms of, well, if that's the case, then music, then definition of that is sound over time. And those two would be the factors. And Cage, in his manifesto, so to speak, if you may, like in 1938, he wrote something called The Future of Music, a credo. You know, we have to, but in a way, a lot of it really came true, and a lot of like IDM or EDM or just any contemporary production, like we're using literally any sound and we're quantifying it and we're sampling it and we're like making objects out of that and almost instruments in and of themselves, you know, to be music. And that's super cool. He was saying, and in that treatise or that piece of writing, and he was saying like, well, in the future, we're going to be able to quantify every single thing, you know, I think the exact wording was like the whole spectrum of sound, you know, will be available in a way because of the technology that's you know available, blah blah blah. And so, but I was like, wow, that's super cool, you know. And as I dove into more of the experimental music scene, if you may, or just what people are doing all around, there's so many different ways of making sound, but I also couldn't really figure out any new ways of making sound. Like I'm not really good at computers, and so. But what encouraged me more, or excited me more, or fascinated me more, was as I kept reading that passage, it said, well, not only will the entire spectrum of sound be available, but also the entire spectrum of time. And he was getting at the SMPTE time, you know, the time of the video editing or whatnot. And that would be the basic unit of measurement, you know. And so that inspired me to make the clock, you know, that I was, you know, kind of obsessing over, you know, this thing. It's just, yeah, and so that became sort of the score, I guess. And another thing is the clock that Patrick was interacting with was sort of another type of score that I tried to use then. So back to that equation of like music being sound over time, then yeah, those are like the 3 factors that I sort of just like wanted to visually play around with. And 3 factors is kind of easier, you know, to kind of mess around and whatnot. So, but that's sort of the beginning of it. Yeah. Yes.
Did you have an audience in mind when you were putting your piece performance together?
I did. Yeah. I like to sound really special and say like every one of my performances is like handcrafted. But in a funny way, it is kind of true. Just because like before CalArts, I think the past couple of 5 years or whatnot, like just there weren't very many gigs in Boston, and so I would be playing at like a library or like an art gallery or like a TV station, and like there was only like one person in the audience, and she was my wife. It was like, you know, like just little things here and there and whatnot. And so I did get in the habit of almost looking at the performance as a spectacle and the performance as a composition, you know, so that I was sort of thinking about, okay, well, what is this performance going to call for, you know, and what do I have at hand? You know, these are kind of compositional, I guess, questions that a composer may ask, I think. And so kind of like, what are the elements? So for me, for this, you know, I was just thinking a lot over the past couple of weeks about just, well, this was, the painting was very much, you know, the past couple of months or so, but in terms of this particular setup, you know, having known like these guys that I'd be, you know, playing with, I thought about like ways of kind of like how far to push in a way. And I thought about as well, like some of you guys, you know, who I invited and, you know, who are here may or may not be at school. And I thought about how to, yeah, how maybe you guys might take it as well, you know, and so I don't know that answers. But I knew you were coming, Annie. So I wanted to, yeah, I don't know, play something that you, yeah, would recognize. I spoke a lick of Cantonese because my brother is here from Hong Kong, and so I guess you could say I handcrafted that, you know, so to speak. But for me, I guess music is, or performance is like the level of engagement. Yeah, so if I'm playing for kids, you know, maybe there would be things I might not do, you know, or maybe I would, or maybe I'll do more of, or whatnot. And so it's almost like a slider in terms of like, you know, intensity level or duration. Maybe the duration is, speaking of time, is sort of been the deciding factor. And it's funny because the more restrictive time that I prescribe a given performance or situation, I found that, like, I don't know, just a lot of things could happen. And it just felt very free, yeah, in that way. So.
How did you come up with 57 minutes?
It was just random.
I'm curious, like, what was it like for the three of you working on this project, and like during this performance in particular, where, like, what moments were really memorable for you, or like did anything stick out?
One of my favorite parts of this performance was the preparation, I think, which was probably about 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks we prepared for this. And the preparation consisted of a text from Tim, I think 2 nights ago, that said, hey guys, I'll see you Wednesday, sound checks at 6 o'clock. Was there anything else?
Can't remember.
I don't think so.
You said we could leave
Oh, we
if
could
we
leave
wanted
after
to.
if we wanted
We
to,
didn't
yeah.
have to stay for the Q&A.
Yeah. I didn't know if you guys are still my friends.
I can say that in its presentation, our performance it seemed very boundaryless, without any parameters. But I feel like we've been groomed for this performance for a couple weeks now in ways that I realized only over that past hour or so. Just regular conversations that I've had with you, all been like training, almost, without my realizing it. I think if you're, you know, in the ways that you feel you're not able to put pen to paper and things like that, you find other mediums like conversation, interaction, relationships, in a way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think a lot of conversations with Tim was the preparation. It was sort of a rehearsal in some way. And so it felt very natural, I think, from the very press of the space bar to just begin the performance, because it does feel like we've been ready for this, sort of, I guess. Ready to not be ready for this.
Yes.
You want to say something, Pat?
Just did.
Thank you. I'm going to agree. No, actually, the issue with the clocks was a series of conversations that Tim and I had recently, and I think that could probably be why I have the clock. Is we both film clocks, and we talked about that, and it seemed probable. It seemed probable that I wound up with the clock because of that. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, So I think we're kind of running out of time, but I think the sound guy gave me the time signal, so I think we have to maybe one last question.
I want you to deposit that.
Oh, I appreciate it. I don't mean to point you out. Trying to include everybody. That's great. Yeah. Maybe one last question or comment, or not, we could let you all go. Yeah. But yeah, so thank you all for coming. Please, give a round of applause to the production team and the Thank you to CalArts. Thank you to all my professors and your professors and our friends and your friends and family. This has been wonderful. Yeah, I couldn't have asked for more. So thank you for coming, and see you around. Have a good night.